4:47 a.m. Laredo, Texas, January 14, 2026. A 12-man SWAT element moved in single file down an unserviced road toward a corrugated steel warehouse at the edge of Webb County's largest rail distribution hub. No sirens, no lights. Radios set to vibrate. The warehouse had a registered tenant, Trans-Border Freight Solutions, LLC, incorporated 6 months earlier in December. Delaware. Lease $18,000 per month, paid 12 months in advance, and wire transfers from a holding company in Monterrey, Mexico. Inside, according to DEA surveillance running for the past 72 hours, were 2.4 tons of finished amphetamine and $12 million in bundled cash, both arriving on the same rail line, both moving on the same schedules, both invisible for 19 months until 48 hours ago. The lead agent pressed a gloved hand flat against the warehouse wall. Cold corrugated metal. No sound from inside. He raised 2 fingers to the team. They went in at 4:48. Inside that warehouse was the endpoint of a 19-month operation. 14 minutes later, the team was back in the warehouse. Tons of methamphetamine had crossed the U.S. border without a single customs seizure or law enforcement flag until 48 hours ago. His name was Cesar Ojeda. He was 41 years old. He had been a freight yard welder for Texas Mexican Railway for 16 years. He didn't work for the DEA. He had no training in the field. Drug interdiction. He would receive no financial reward for what he did. He wasn't even looking for anything. He was on his lunch break. October 22nd, 2021. The yard stretched in every direction. Rails and ballast gravel, and the low mechanical hum of diesel switcher engines, repositioning cars between lines. Ojeda had his lunch in a paper bag, same as most days, at a concrete barrier near the switching tower, where he could see 3 lines at once and catch whatever breeze came off the Rio Grande. October. He had time. His next weld ticket wasn't until 1:15. He finished eating and started walking back toward the tool room. He passed the string of tanker cars staged on line 7. 47 cars in the consist. According to the yard manifest he glanced at during his morning briefing, declared cargo. Commercial grade vegetable glycerin, origin Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico, destination Houston, Texas Intermodal Transit Hub, standard industrial freight. Texas Mexican Railway ran 4 to 6 glycerin hauls every month. The material moved in bulk, shipped as biofuels, precursor or pharmaceutical grade glycerin, depending on the buyer. Ojeda wasn't thinking about cargo classifications. He was watching the cars the way welders always watch metal, not deliberately, just reflexively, the same way a carpenter looks at a door frame and sees whether it's plumb. Even from across a parking lot, you develop a sense it happens without effort. He stopped at car TMXX-4-1. It was a standard DOT-111 tank car, white painted 60 feet long, with the usual inspection ports. A pressure relief device and a top fill hatch on the crown of the tank. He stood and looked at it. He wasn't certain why he stopped. Then he saw it. The top fill hatch had a circumferential weld bead on the flange. Not unusual, hatches got resealed for maintenance and repair. But this bead had a very strong weld bead. Had a ridge mismatch at the 2 o'clock position, a slight pucker in the metal, a 0.5 millimeter deviation, where the welder had adjusted electrode angle mid-pass. We'd completed the seal. From 6 feet away in ordinary light, you would not have seen it. The car would have passed any visual inspection performed at standard distance. Laredo had been welding for 19 years. He had taught weld certification courses twice a year at Laredo Community College. He had personal standards. He looked at the hat. He looked at the underframe hook where maintenance tickets were clipped. Empty. He pulled out the company tablet that every TXMR maintenance worker carried and searched the car number, TMXX-4-1-2-7. No recent maintenance record, no repair ticket, no authorized work in the system. Someone had welded this hatch shut without documentation, without a job ticket. At some point between the car's last dock inspection in Monterrey and its arrival in the Laredo staging yard, Ojeda took 2 photographs with his phone, the bead from directly above, the ridge mismatch close-up. Then he walked back to the tool room and at 12:47 p.m. sent an email to the TXMR compliance hotline with both photographs. Subject line, unauthorized weld on top fill. Hatch TMXX-4-127 line 7 Laredo. He did not use the word drugs. He did not accuse anyone of anything. He reported a maintenance anomaly. It was a professional matter. He told a reporter months later when his role became public. It wasn't even my hatch. The bead was just wrong. TXMR's compliance department received approximately 340 emails per month from field workers. Most were routine maintenance flags, damage reports, OSHA items, the system triage by urgency with a 48-hour response window for non-emergency items. Ojeda's email entered the queue at 12:47 p.m. and was flagged medium. Priority, but TXMR operated under a standing security protocol implemented after an industry-wide review following a 2017 incident, in which rail cars at the Port of Laredo were found to contain contraband concealed in false floor compartments. The protocol was specific. Any unauthorized weld work on sealed containment surfaces, hatches, inspection ports, clean-out caps, automatically triggered a secondary notification to the Railways Liaison Officer at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The email crossed to the CBP liaison at 2:14 p.m. CBP ran the car number against its inspection history. TMXX-4-1-2-7 had entered through Laredo's Columbia Solidarity International Bridge on October 21st, the prior day, and had cleared in 4 minutes. Standard glycerin haul, pre-cleared through the fast lane program for approved shippers. No flags. The liaison noted the anomaly and forwarded it as a precautionary measure to the DEA El Paso Intelligence Center. At 4:51 p.m., an intelligence analyst at the EPIC ran a survey of the EPSC's intelligence and the car against the center's freight anomaly database. The car had crossed 3 times in the previous 7 months. All 3 declared glycerin. All 3 cleared. All 3 originating from the same shipper. Químicos del Norte, SA to CV, Monterrey, Nuevo León. The analyst pulled Químicos del Norte, SA to CV, Monterrey, Nuevo León. Del Norte's profile. The company had been registered in 2022. Commercial address in Monterrey's Apodaca Industrial District. Valid Mexican, tax ID for employees on record. Historical shipping to buyers in Texas, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. On paper, nothing unusable. The analyst ran the delivery address listed for this tanker's offloaded cargo. Trans-Border Freight Solutions, LLC, 6 months old, Delaware registered. Operating address on Mines Road in Laredo. Lease paid 12 months in advance. That detail was worth a closer look. By 7 p.m. on October 22nd, a DEA field supervisor in the Laredo resident office had been briefed by phone. By 9 p.m. on October 22nd, a DEA field supervisor in the Laredo resident office had been briefed by phone. At 9 p.m., a surveillance team had the Mines Road warehouse under visual observation. By midnight, a federal judge had signed a Title III wiretap order on 3-way surveillance. Phone numbers associated with Trans-Border Freight Solutions, car TMXX-4-1-2-7, sat on line 7 of the Laredo Intermodal Terminal untouched, while Fed General agents repositioned. 2 days later, when the morning transfer crew arrived to offload the tanker, DEA agents were already positioned at the warehouse receiving end. When the transfer pump engaged and the first collection drum began filling, not with glycerin, but with a cloudy, viscous suspension that field test strips confirm. Was methamphetamine dissolved in glycerin carrier? 3 crew members were removed from the operation mid-pour. Their hands were still wet. The well-beat Ojeda had photographed on his lunch break had sealed 1,400 kilograms of methamphetamine inside a single rail tank car. That was 1 car. The fleet was 8. If you're following this, drop a like now, because what comes next is where the scale of this operation becomes something else entirely. What DEA investigators understood within the first 12 hours was that they had not interdicted a shipment. They had caught the tail end of an operation running for close to 2 years. The 3 crew members taken into custody at the Laredo warehouse were low-level transfer workers. 2 Mexican nationals on work visas, 1 U.S. citizen from Webb County. All 3 cooperated. All 3 understood their position. What they provided was partial. The parts of the operation visible from their level. A Monterrey contact number, a warehouse supervisor's nickname, El Tornero, the lathe operator, though no one in the crew had actually met him. A payment structure that ran through prepaid cards, codes texted to a burner phone, collection in cash from a courier who came once a month. It was enough to understand the shape of the system. It was not enough to dismantle it. I spent a significant amount of time going through the federal case documents. And one of the things that I learned from the federal case documents was that one detail kept nagging at me. Not the scale of it, which was remarkable on its own, but the engineering of it. This operation was not improvised. What Cartel del Noreste had built in the Laredo rail corridor reflected knowledge of industrial freight logistics, regulatory inspection cycles, and commercial docking. Documentation requirements that exceeds what most legitimate freight companies demonstrate. The method reconstructed from court filings and DEA case summaries work like this. Methamphetamine in liquid suspended form, high-purity crystal dissolved in a glycerin carrier at concentrations that preserve chemical stability through multi-day rail transit is chemically similar enough to commercial vegetable glycerin that field presumptive tests on the mixed liquid produced ambiguous results. A definitive positive identification requires laboratory analysis, not a strip test at a crossing. Rail tankers move commercial-grade glycerin through the Laredo corridor were low-priority inspection targets. The standard screening for liquid bulk rail cargo relied on 3 things: manifest verification, shipper history, and cargo weight with unacceptable variance. The weight comparison was where the method was close to perfect. Methamphetamine suspended in glycerin at the concentrations the cartel was using. Approximately 14% active compound by volume produces a mixture with a density and weight profile within 3% of pure commercial glycerin. Standard variance tolerances on commercial freight run higher than 3%. Every car in the fleet passed weight comparison at the crossing. Every car's manifest matched an approved shipper with a document, commercial history. The only physical tell was the weld on the top fill hatch. Standard practice for glycerin tankers. The hatch is open for loading at the origin facility and sealed mechanically with standard bolts and a gasket. No welding required. The cartel's modified tankers were loaded at terrain with the meth glycerin mixture. Then the top fill hatch was welded shut at a switching yard in Nuevo Leon before the cars crossed the border. The weld provided an additional layer of tamper evidence. If anyone opened the hatch in transit, it would be visible. But it also meant that every car in the fleet carried an unauthorized weld on its containment hatch. At every crossing in 19 months, that weld had passed. Here's what strikes me about this case. The system didn't fail to catch the shipments because of negligence. The inspectors who cleared those cars were doing exactly what their protocols required. The flaw was architectural. The standard glycerin tanker inspector checklist didn't flag welded hatches because welded hatches under normal operating conditions don't exist. There was no box to check, and that gap had been identified, understood, and systematically exploited. DEA's Laredo resident office coordinated with the El Paso Field Division and the DEA Monterrey Country Office, an embedded advisory team working in cooperation with Mexican federal law enforcement authorities to approach the investigation from both directions simultaneously. On the U.S. side, financial subpoenas on trans-border freight solutions, cross-referencing against cell tower location data tied to the 3Cs phones, and a full freight history reconstruction on the Chimicos del Norte shipping account, going back 24 hours. Months. On the Mexican side, surveillance on the Apodaca Industrial District and identification of the Monterrey area switching facility where the hatches were found were being sealed. The financial traces revealed the pattern fastest. Trans-border freight solutions had received over 6 months of operation. Why? Higher transfers totaling $1.1 million from a chain of 6 holding companies, each registered in a different jurisdiction: Delaware, Wyoming, New Mexico, Panama, a British Virgin Islands entity, and a Cayman Islands entity at the top of the structure. The holding company chain had no commercial activity, no employees, no filings beyond the minimum required for legal existence. The money moved through them in sequences of transfers between 24 and 72 hours apart, cycling through accounts at 6 different financial institutions before arriving in the operating account for Transborder Freight Solutions. Classic layering structure. The cash had been generated somewhere, deposited somewhere, and moved through this chain to create enough transactional distance between its origin and its use. The tracing it backward was slow. Investigators estimated, based on the transfer volumes and timing, that the warehousing and distribution operation in Laredo had cost approximately $1.8 million to establish and maintain over its operational lifetime. Against revenues the operation had generated, wholesale methamphetamine pricing in Houston running between $42,000 and $47,000 per kilogram, the return was approximately $340 to $1. Subscribe so you don't miss what the financial investigation revealed about how that money was being spent. Being recycled into the legitimate U.S. economy, because that part of the case is still active. The wiretap authorization had been running for 3 weeks when the investigation nearly collapsed. A DEAIT security contractor conducting a routine audit of Epic surveillance system authorizations flagged the Steel Trench wiretap as potentially overlapping with a parallel FBI organized crime investigation that had been targeting Cartel del Noreste financials networks in the Rio Grande Valley for the prior 8 months. The jurisdictional overlap required an interagency review before either agency could continue active collection on the affected numbers. For 9 days, the Title III intercepts went inactive. During those 9 days, the phones associated with the Laredo distribution, the Camacos del Norte shipping account showed no new freight movements into the Laredo corridor. The surveillance team on the Mines Road warehouse observed no action. Activity. To the investigative team, the timing looked ominous. They had been operational for 3 weeks. 3 weeks was long enough for a security breach to be identified. If someone in the cartel's network had access to information about the investigation, if the phones went quiet because the cartel knew, the entire operation wiretap authorization, surveillance investment, undercover groundwork, cooperating witness agreements was over. The inter-agency review cleared on November 19, 2025. The wiretaps came back online. 2 days later, Vela Gutierrez's primary phone made a call from the parking lot of a shopping center on the north side of Laredo. The content was operational. The Monterrey facility had resolved a personnel issue. A new transit schedule was being set. The next run would be in the first week of December. The phones had gone quiet because the car had temporarily paused the operation to address a staffing problem at the Monterrey welding facility. Not because of a security breach, not because of surveillance detection, because they'd had a welder quit. The timing was coincidence. The investigation had survived. What the second phase of the wire collection produced was a clearer map of the organizational structure. The Químicos del Norte Shell Company occupied the legitimate face of the operation. Actual glycerin shipments, real customers in Texas and Tennessee, credible commercial paperwork interspersed with the modified tanker runs to maintain a consistent and verifiable shipper history. It was not purely a front company. It was a legitimate business that had been corrupted at some level to provide cover for illegitimate ones. Below Químicos del Norte, the tanker fleet itself, 8 cars leased through a separate entity registered to an attorney. In Nuevo Laredo, whose name would appear in the federal indictment as an unindicted co-conspirator, the attorney's role appeared to be administrative, maintaining the paper structures, not operational management. He has not been charged. Below the fleet, the welding operation, a switching yard facility in the municipality of Salinas Victoria, Nuevo León, operating out of a leased industrial unit adjacent to a legitimate rail maintenance company. The facility was unlicensed. For the work it was performing, it had no commercial registration, no tax filings, no identifiable business existence. 4 welders rotating on a schedule that investigators later reconstructed as 3 active shifts per month aligned with the tanker transit schedule. The welders were paid $3,000 per month. Car and cash delivered in person in Monterrey within 48 hours of each successful U.S. crossing. The 3 bribed Mexican Federal Rail. Authority inspectors at the Colombia Solidarity crossing were paid $500 per tanker pass. These were the costs of the operation: $2,400, $200 per car and corruption payments, $11,000 per transit and labor costs, including logistics handling on both sides of the border. Total operating costs per crossing, including the welding and the bribes and the transport fees and the warehousing, approximately $80,000 per tanker run. Each successful run delivered approximately $43 million wholesale on arrival in Houston. 19 months, 8 tankers, 14 tons, estimated wholesale value, $610 million. Here's what nobody expected and what most people, including us when we first went through the case files, got wrong about this operation. The product wasn't moved as packaged methamphetamine. It was moved as liquid, dissolved, mixed at a concentration that was chemically similar enough to its declared carrier to resist standard field testing. The cartel's chemist had solved the detection problem by making the drugs look like something else at the molecular level, then hiding the volume inside an industrial container that nobody was opening. Because opening industrial glycerin tankers at a commercial freight crossing is not part of the inspection protocol. Would you have caught this? Put yourself in the position of the CBP inspector at the Colombia Solidarity crossing for a moment. 47 tankers in the consist declare glycerin from a pre-approved shipper. Weight within tolerance manifests clean. Your shift is 11 hours long. You're processing several hundred freight movements today. The protocol for the shipment type is verify manifest, run weight comparison, check shipper status. All 3 check. You sign it through. That's not a mistake. That's the protocol working as designed. The protocol just wasn't designed for this. Undercover authorization for Operation Steel Trench was approved in late November 2025, following the identification of the Salinas Victoria facility through wiretap intercepts and cross-reference cell tower data. DEA placed 2 agents into the operational environment, one from the El Paso Field Division, one seconded from the DEA Monterrey Country Office, working undercover identities as a freight logistic contractor and a transport corridor coordinator, respectively. The cover identities were constructed over 3 weeks and supported by documentation that included a shell freight company with a fabricated 6-month operating history and 2 manufactured reference relationships. The Monterrey-based Undercover made first contact with the company's contact with the Salinas Victoria facility on December 9, 2025. He met with a man identified in the federal indictment as Fabian Soto Arce, 52, who operated the lease facility. The approach was framed as a business development conversation, a new client with sealed vessel welding requirements. Requirements, discretion important, volume potentially significant. Soto Arce was measured. The first 2 meetings produced nothing of evidentiary value. He was professional, deliberate, non-committal. He asked for references. He asked about the client's existing logistics relationships. He asked about payment structure. The DEA team built the reference structure out in real time. The shell freight company was enhanced. 2 fabricated reference contacts were added to the shell. Both DEA personnel and cover roles were made available and briefed. 3rd meeting, December 26th. Soto Arce said he could accommodate the new client. The undercover agent was present at 2 welding sessions in January 2026. He documented the procedure from inside the facility. Tanker cars arrived with the top fill hatch open, interior already filled to approximately 80% capacity with the meth glycerin mixture loaded earlier that day. At a separate location. The hatch was then welded shut on site using a MIG process with a filler rod and pass pattern that Soto Arce reviewed personally before signing off. The Undercover's documentation included still photographs, audio, and a 23-minute continuous video recording that showed the procedure in detail on a car that would later be identified in the federal indictment as Fleet Unit 7. Simultaneously, the El Paso-based Undercover had made contact with Vela Gutierrez's distribution network on the U.S. side under a cover as a new storage facility operator, willing to handle large volume freight with no inquiries asked. By late January, he had been vetted to the point of being offered a partial tour of the Mines Road facilities receiving setup, not the warehouse he had been offered. Interior, but the loading dock configuration and pump connection layout. Here's the part that doesn't sit right. Soto RC's operation had been running for at least 19 years. Months at that point, processing 8 tanker cars on a recurring schedule, paying 4 welders and coordinating with at least 3 corrupted rail inspectors. He had survived 19 months without exposure. He was cautious enough to run 3 meetings before accepting a new client. He had countermeasures, lookouts, protocol, and yet the undercover placement worked not because of a surveillance failure on Soto Arce's part, but because the cartel's vetting process designed to assess law enforcement risk didn't have a mechanism to evaluate the specific risk of an undercover posing as a business con. Contact. He ran reference checks. The references came back clean. That was the limit of his verification capability. This is the structural vulnerability in criminal enterprises that rely on secrecy. Their vetting systems are designed to identify informants and law enforcement contacts within their existing network. They're not designed to identify people who have never been in their network before. The undercover came from outside. The vetting protocol couldn't see it. 4 months of collusion, election, 62 hours of recorded wire, 843 pages of financial analysis, 31 targets identified in trade. Across 3 jurisdictions, the DEA El Paso Field Division presented the package to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Texas on January 10, 2026. The federal grand jury returned the indictments on January 12th. Coordination began immediately with Mexican federal authorities for simultaneous execution. The simultaneous operations were designed to execute within a 90-minute window across all jurisdictions. Enough time to prevent communication between targets in different locations, not so compressed that any single team couldn't manage its entry timing. Every target on the end indictment had been physically located in the prior 72 hours. Every entry point had been surveilled. Every primary phone number was under live monitoring. January 14th, 2026, pre-dawn, 4:48 a.m. Central Time. The 12-man SWAT element entered the Mines Road warehouse through 2 points simultaneously. The loading dock roll-up door, which had a mechanical bypass the advance team had identified and mapped during surveillance in a personnel door on the south wall. 2 armed guards in the loading area, both taken into custody in the first 45 seconds. Without shots fired, the warehouse supervisor, Marcos Fuentes Reyna, was found in an enclosed office at the rear of the building, reaching for a burned phone in the top desk drawer. The phone contained 62 contacts inside the warehouse, a transfer rack with 6 industrial pump assemblies. Connected to a manifold, 4 tanker cars currently decoupled from rail service and staged in an interior rail spur that ran through the building's north wall. The warehouse had been built, or retrofitted, with that interior track specifically for this operation. 4 additional tanker cars were already in operation, transit on U.S. soil heading toward destinations in Houston and Dallas. The transfer process was in its 3rd hour when the SWAT team entered. 3,800 kilograms of methamphetamine had already been transferred into sealed intermediate bulk containers. 600 kilograms remained in the tankers. Total seized on site, 2.4 tons, $12 million in bundled U.S. currency in a locked room adjoining the loading dock. The currency was sorted into denomination packs and labeled with initials that investigators later matched to distribution network partners. At 5 a.m. on September 1st, 2018, the U.S. Department of State issued a statement to the U.S. Department of State. A separate DEA task force with FBI support executed a search warrant at a self-storage facility in Shelby County, Tennessee. A node that had received product in 3 documented deliveries over the prior 8 months based on financial transfers cross-referenced against a distribution contact identified in the wiretap. 400 kilograms of methamphetamine recovered, 3 individuals arrested on site at 6:15 a.m. Central Dallas law enforcement assisted in the execution of 3 simultaneous residential search warrants in suburban Webb County zip codes targeting a district. Cell that moved product through a car wash business and 2 collision repair shops. 1 individual arrested, 2 outstanding on warrant. Monterrey at 7:40 a.m. local time. Mexican federal forces with DEA attaché support executed simultaneous search warrants at the Apodicles, commercial address for Químicos del Norte, and at the Salinas Victoria welding facility. The Químicos del Norte address produced business records, 3 computers, and 1 individual, a financial administrator who was not named in the U.S. indictment and was handled under Mexican federal proceedings. The Salinas were the first to be arrested. Lina's Victoria facility produced 4 tanker cars identified as fleet units, welding equipment consistent with the MIG process documented by the Undercover. Agent and Soto RC himself taken into custody at his home address 20 minutes after the facility entry. The facility entry arrived 22 minutes too late for the welders. Surveillance camera footage recovered from a rail yard cafe adjacent to the Salinas Victoria property showed an unidentified male, later determined to have no formal employment connection to Soto RC's operation, making a brief phone call at 6:58 a.m. local time. Seconds. The number called was associated with one of the 4 rotating welders. 22 minutes later, when federal forces secured the facility, the welders' personal toolboxes had been cleared from their storage lockers. Work clothes were folded on benches. 1 man had left a half-eaten meal on a workbench. They did not have a job, not leave because of a surveillance detection. They were tipped by the cafe lookout, a contact investigators later characterized in court documents as a personal acquaintance with no identified operational role. His function was passive. He observed the unusual vehicle and personnel presence near the facility and made a single call. That call, 11 seconds long, was sufficient. 4 welders. Currently, the subjects of Interpol red notices issued through cooperation between U.S. and Mexican authorities. As of the date this case file was reviewed, no confirmed locations were found. The 31 individuals named in the federal indictment face charges across several categories. Conspiracy to import a controlled substance into the United States. Conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, money laundering, and for the 3 bribed Mexican federal rail inspectors. Violations under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act through their facilitation of a criminal enterprise affecting U.S. commerce. That last charge was a legal theory, applied through 3 prior successful prosecutions, and had been specifically constructed to reach corruption activity that occurred outside U.S. territory, but produced direct effects within it. Vela Gutierrez was arrested at his residence in a gated community north of downtown Laredo at 4:51 a.m. 3 minutes after the warehouse entry team made initial contact, he answered the door. He was cooperative from the first moment. He asked for his attorney. When the attorney arrived, he asked the arresting agents a question. Did the welder talk? He had no information about Ojeda. He had no way of knowing how the investigation had started, had originated. He understood the cartel's operation well enough to know that the physical evidence, an unauthorized weld on a hatch, was the only vulnerability in the system that didn't require a human informant. He had apparently thought about this. The arresting agent told him no. A welder hadn't talked. Vela Gutierrez had been arrested. Nodded. Then how did you find us? The agent didn't answer. Vela Gutierrez entered a guilty plea in February 2026. Conspiracy to import methamphetamine, money laundering, and is scheduled for sentencing later this year. Prosecutors have indicated they will seek a sentence in the range of 22 to 25 years based on the quantity of methamphetamine attributable to his role in the financial scale of the operation. Fuentes Reyna, the warehouse supervisor, has entered a not guilty plea and faces trial. The 3 bribed Mexican federal rail inspectors have been prosecuted in Mexico City under a cooperation framework with the DEA. 2 have accepted plea agreements. 1 is contesting the charges. Soto Arc, the welding facility operator, entered a cooperation agreement with Mexican federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony has provided, according to a sealed document filed in the Western District case, substantial and material assistance in identifying additional CDN personnel within the Logistics and Finance Division. Here's what bothers me about this case and what most coverage has avoided. The inspection failure that allowed this operation to run for 19 months is not attributable to any individual inspector or any single procedural breakdown. It is attributable to a resource allocation decision at the policy level, one that treated commercial freight crossing speed as a service quality metric rather than a risk variable. The fast lane authorization that allowed Quimico's Del Norte's tankers to clear in 4 minutes was designed for commercial efficiency, for reducing friction. That's a legitimate policy goal. But when inspection speed is systematically prioritized, it creates gaps like this. Gaps that are not necessarily a sophisticated adversary can identify, test, and exploit over years. The question isn't whether the inspectors at the Columbia Solidarity Cross should have caught the weld. The question is why a welded top fill hatch on a glycerin tanker wasn't on the inspection protocol in the first place. Cesar Ojeda was interviewed by federal investigators the day after he sent the compliance email. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Investigators asked him to walk away from the scene, walk through the sequence, what he saw, what made him stop, why he photographed it, why he reported it, whether anyone had approached him before him. Hander suggested he look the other way. No contact, no approach. He had seen a non-conforming weld on a tanker car without a maintenance record, and he had reported it through the established compliance process because that was the correct procedure. Investigators offered him the Federal Witness Protection Program, relocation, new identity documentation, financial transition support. Cartel del Noreste's track record with individuals who cooperated against their logistics operations included confirmed targeting of cooperating witnesses in at least 3 prior federal cases in the Southern District of Texas. Ojeda asked for time to think about it. He thought about it. He declined. He returned to work at the Laredo Intermodal Terminal on October 6th, 25th, 3 days after sending the email, 2 days after his initial interview. He has remained employed there. His workstation is on the same service road he walked on his lunch break. His employer issued a brief public statement after the indictments were announced. TXMR commended the culture of safety and compliance its workforce demonstrated. A DEA El Paso Field Division commendation letter, signed by the special agent in charge, was sent to Ojeda and forwarded to his personnel file. He has made one public comment about the entire matter. 7 words spoken to a reporter. It was, even my hatch. The bead was just wrong. As of the filing of the most recent court documents in the case, 17 of the 31 indicted individuals were found guilty of the crime. The court ruled that they have entered guilty pleas or are in active plea negotiations with federal prosecutors. 14 are proceeding toward trial or have trial dates pending. 6 of the 8 tanker cars seized during Operation Steel Trench have been formally condemned and will be processed through federal forfeiture. 2 remain under forensic examination. The 4 tanker cars intercepted in transit on January 14th, already on U.S. soil and heading toward the U.S. Houston and Dallas distribution nodes were impounded at the Laredo rail yard before offloading. Their contents, 1,200 additional kilograms of methamphetamine, recovered intact. The Salinas Victoria welding facility's lease was terminated in February 2026. The Quimicos del Norte commercial adjudication was completed in January of this year. In Apodaca, Nuevo Leon has been occupied since March 2026 by a legitimate pharmaceutical ingredient company with no connection to the prior. Its filing history shows no unusual activity. The financial recovery is partial. $6 million of the $12 million seized at the Mines Road warehouse has been traced to specific accounts and is subject to asset forfeiture proceedings. The remaining 6 million cannot be fully attributed. The currency's denomination mix and packaging materials suggest it was collected across multiple distribution points over several months, some of which have not been identified. That money's overpriced. Origin remains in the formal case language under active investigation. The 14 distribution nodes identified in the steel trench case files have all been operationally identified, disrupted. 11 individuals named in the indictment's distribution section are in custody. 3 remain outstanding on warrant. 14 tons of methamphetamine entered the United States through the Laredo rail corridor over 19 months. Federal investigators have been able to document the distribution pathway for approximately 9 tons of it. The remaining 5 tons moved through network segments that extended beyond what the current indictments cover. Where those 5 tons went, who received them, how much of the resulting cash entered the legitimate U.S. economy? These questions remain open. Is this true? Justice fully served here? Or does the fraction of the network that still hasn't been traced mean something larger remains unsolved? Comment below. We read everyone. The operation that Cesar Ojeda terminated with a compliance email had been running since March 2024. It had run for 19 months without a single interdiction failure. It had moved product through the highest volume rail freight corridor on the U.S. southern border. It had used real companies, real pay, paperwork, real inspection systems, not to evade them, but to pass through them, because the systems were not designed to see this specific thing. What stopped it wasn't a wiretap, it wasn't a financial anomaly flag, it wasn't an informant, it was a weld bead that a man on his lunch break recognized as substandard work, on a car that was not assigned to him, on a hatch he had no professional obligation to inspect. The Cartel del Noreste Logistics Division built a near-perfect system. Vela Gutierrez was correct. The system had no informant in it. There was no penetration. There was no leak. There was a welder who had been doing his job for 16 years and who noticed in passing that someone else hadn't done theirs. The network is dismantled. The demand that created it still exists. In the methodology, liquid suspension and glycerin carrier, legitimate front shipper, welded hatch concealment, didn't die when this operation did. It was known in DEA and CB. The stream under which company name is a question that federal freight security analysts are working on in real time. Subscribe. When that next case breaks, you'll want to know. To already know this one.